Recall that in the days before the election and the days shortly after the election, NINAS had advanced a proposition for transition. How do we move away from the wrong road we are traveling on now back to the Reconstruction, the Union Reconstruction, Union Reconfiguration, and Union Renegotiation that needs to happen without further delay, except we want to forget the Union in its entirety. By broadcasts titled Nigeria in Distress, the NINAS template for transition, and an earlier one titled Modalities for the NINAS Transitioning, proposed by the Constitutional Force Majeure. The summary of those two broadcasts is simply the fact that somebody must now get on a broadcast on behalf of Nigeria to say that the Constitution of Nigeria, the Unitary Constitution of Nigeria, can no longer carry the Union beyond where it is and go into the Reconstruction, Renegotiation, Reconfiguration that has to be done, Union Reconstruction, and everything required to do it already available in the NINAS Constitutional Force Majeure, the 5-point proposition of the NINAS Constitutional Force Majeure. The details are all start to finish available. In those two broadcasts, one before the election, the other after the election, NINAS had placed a plan on the table because it is for transitioning, for moving practical steps for getting to do what needs to be done now. It is one thing to make suggestions about, things that should happen. It's another to put on the table a plan for how to do it. Everybody's talking about restructuring. Oh, new government, come, restructure. We have been saying all that since 1999. We've been saying it even before 1999 when the campaign for sovereign conference was all over the place. Remember, there were people who took that campaign from the air and brought it down to what became Pronaco. I was in that team. We went away from the theory of sovereign conference to actually calling the nationalities together to hold a meeting that was unfettered by government. 2005, 2006. How do we get rid of this 1999 constitution? We went to court from the outcome of that meeting of the people, the sovereign constituent components of Nigeria, the nationalities, to the suits in 2007 challenging the basis of that constitution, in which we had plaintiffs that included Enohoro, Ojukwu, Shoyinka, Sisi Ono, and a whole number of others. Bankole Oki, the senior advocate. Of course, the two men that were being held by Obasanjo for treason at the time, Asari Dokubo and Wazurike, they were all plaintiffs in that suit. And so we were able to set in motion something that could have, that provided the framework for winding down the operation of that constitution and getting into the transition, the Codesa style transition that will work out what will replace it in an orderly manner. Everybody was in agreement except the government of the time led by Obasanjo and those he coronated after him. And so we have again come to where the problems we were highlighting all the while, the dangers we were pointing from afar all the while, they have now come. We've had an election on the basis of a constitution that we should have jettisoned, and we're heading into a spin. We've been through it before. We saw how the one of 64, 65 ended in 66. were again in that trajectory, in that cycle of going into an election in the midst of a disputed constitutional arrangement. Let the younger elements ask the elders who know, since history was removed, and the younger elements will say, oh, we do not know. Ask your fathers, ask your uncles, whether Nigeria did not proceed into election in the midst of a disputed constitution, and whether the union did not collapse, resulting in the inferno that consumed almost 5 million lives between 1966 and 1970. We are just about to repeat the same, and the characters, you know, if you plot a map of Nigeria and you put on that map all of those who did what they did that became that problem, you will see that we're right back where we started. There's a Tinubu today that has gone to revive the alliance of 1967 since 2015. And that alliance of 1967 that came against the East have been causing havoc and dragging us to where we have now, you know, we are face to face with that catastrophe. It's racing towards us, but many of us are not seeing it. All because we chose to go to election 2023 under the Constitution of 1999 at a time we should have been going into transition. And in dragging us in that direction, these candidates that are now crying about mandate, they seem to have rid themselves of the lessons of history. Looking at their age, one will only say it's a pity that they pretend not to know, because they know that there are problems that cannot be solved by elections. But for whatever reason, they chose to go with the enemy in dragging us towards election under the constitution that shouldn't have been the basis of union. And so, where we've reached now requires the representation. Let us present one more time what we need to do precisely from where things are now. The election has happened. It has got into controversy, the type that cannot be resolved peacefully, however you approach it, except you start with the truth, except you accept that we can't build on this foundation of a fraudulent constitution any further. Anything you build on such a foundation will collapse on you. It's going to kill people that, like we saw before. It could be worse now. In fact, it's bound to be worse now because of the numbers that are awake. Before, people were not awake. Now people are awake to an agenda, an ethnic agenda. There's a Fulani agenda. There's a Caliphate agenda that is reinforced by the 1967 alliance that brings that Caliphate together with the renegade wing of the Southwest. And the Caliphate that is fighting in that formation of aligning with the renegade wing. Mark my words, we didn't say Yoruba. We say renegade wing of the Southwest. We saw Obasanjo. We saw Akintola before him. We are now seeing the one that went to bring Buhari in 2015. We saw all of what they did to chase away Jonathan from the Eastern Bloc. What was Jonathan's principal offense? Because they saw Jonathan as accommodating the Igbo in the scheme of things in the inner sanctuary of governance. That was Jonathan's principal offense. Oh, Chief of Army Staff, Chief Minister, what do they, Minister for Coordination of Economy, Coordinating Minister for the Economy, which is like a Prime Minister, Secretary to Government, Pius. That was Jonathan's principal offense, for which the alliance of 1967, Caliphate and renegade wing of Southwest put fire everywhere, lied everywhere across the globe. and then hounded Jonathan out of office. In saying, "It is my turn, let those who do not understand now understand," Tinubu was not talking about 6 geopolitical zones, because all the argument was based on that ignorance of thinking that he was talking about 6 geopolitical zones. No, Tinubu was talking about that alliance of the caliphate and the renegade wing of the southwest. You will do your turn, I will do my turn. On this occasion, it's my turn. He wasn't talking about rotation among 6 geopolitical zones. And so it is within the context of that reality that we are coming back to tell all of those who are trapped in this failed Lugadian experiment of 1914 called Nigeria at this time. Because when the rain comes, it will not spare anybody. When the fire comes, it will not spare any part. We've already seen aspects of it. Nigeria is now the global capital for poverty. Nigeria is now the worst killing field. Even countries at war are not losing the number of people that are being killed. Just 3 days ago, Nasarawa, 38 people. The other day, even now, people are still running helter-skelter in southern Kaduna because they have been overrun. Plateau has not gone any better. Countries that are at war are not losing the number of people that are being killed in Nigeria. And so, whichever way you look at it, look at the corruption we're talking about. What have we achieved by clinging on to this constitution to the extent that another election has now happened, against the council not to, from Ninas? And people are running their mouth about who stole whose mandate. The mandate that was stolen, the first mandate that was stolen, so that we can make things clear, is the mandate of the alliance we built for freedom of the trapped constituent components. We spent 20 years to build an alliance of the South and Middle Belt to free all of the peoples of the South and Middle Belt from the bondage, the caliphate bondage that has that has framed itself as unitary Nigeria. But some of our dishonest elders, and I know it's a heavy word to use, I use that word advisedly. Some of our dishonest elders found a way to present that alliance as one for seeking power. South and Middle Belt Leadership Forum and all kinds of other conjectures depicting coming together of the South and Middle Belt. But for the purpose of seeking political power as president of Nigeria. They found, again, dishonest church leaders. And I mean that one even more seriously. Dishonest church leaders whom we had gone to share what the problem was with, but who decided to hijack that mandate of freedom to now go to, sacrifice it on the altar of power. They want power as president instead of freedom for their people. That's how we got to going into election. Of course, they found sufficient numbers of ill-informed and ignorant young people who do not know that the constitutional arrangement was the main problem and not the question of leadership, for which reason they rallied around Peter Obi to provide a different kind of leadership. Of course, rallied by people like Part-3, who was telling them that it was all about leadership. And we saw when Peter Obi came, knowing the truth, but came to tell them that the constitution is not the problem. It is leadership I'm going to provide. And then citing animal farm type of statistics all over the place. We have to speak this difficult truths to let us know that we have a mandate that was stolen to drag us to election to preserve the constitution imposed by the enemy, so that those who are pursuing after that power would get to government house by swearing to defend and uphold the constitution that enslaved their own people. Every attempt to get them to see that there was no road in where they were going got rebuffed. Here we are. So when they talk about stolen mandate, to us, in this fight that is going on about who will win, both of them are like two robbery gangs fighting over what was taken from us. And our interest is in recovering that thing that was taken from us. And therefore, the mandate they are talking about is already a stolen property. The fact that they want to convert it in a manner they can use it, that is political power, does not remove anything from the substantive charge of a mandate that was taken. And so we will now have to invite, for the purpose of the transition we are talking about, the transition that we must now go to, instead of proceeding with outcome of election and coronating somebody to come and continue to govern with the constitution we reject, that transition, we now expressly invite the candidates. Both candidates, Bola Tinubu and Peter Obi, must now surrender their so-called mandates and reinvest same into the Union Reconstruction imperative, the transitioning to rework the constitutional basis of Nigeria. We invite Peter Obi to reinvest, to surrender and reinvest that mandate that is now in controversy back into the liberation of the people. What do we mean? He has to, the same way he announced that constitution was not the problem, Peter Obi has to, if he is on the side of the people that have been tormented under this constitution, he has to come publicly and say to the hearing of the whole world that the Constitution of Nigeria, the Unitary Constitution of Nigeria as imposed, is the problem that needs to be solved. That the mandate, the election has happened, everybody saw that he won the election. But he has to surrender that mandate now for the purpose of addressing the constitutional anomaly by himself. On the same count, we invite candidate Tinubu, who knows the truth about what the problem is, because he was in Nadeko. There's nothing we need to explain to him in all of whatever you hear Ninas is saying, because it was from Nadeko. The conveners of Nadeko were the same conveners of Pronaco, Enohoro, Shoyinka. You know the rest of them. Those conveners carried on with the task of reworking the constitutional basis of Nigeria after the soldiers left in 1999. And Tinubu was governor in Lagos. He wasn't a stranger to all of how it became what it became, going from Pronaco to now MNN, that went to court in 2007 to say that the constitution was a fraud. From there, the nationalities began to come. From after their solemn assemblies, in which they repudiated that constitution by themselves, Port Harcourt in 2015, Ibadan 2017, Makurdi in 2018, nationalities from across these three alliance blocks rejecting that constitution as basis of Nigeria, we then became Nigerian Indigenous Nationalities Alliance for Self-Determination. And look at what has happened. The Hausa have now risen up in Kano and Sokoto and elsewhere to say we're indigenous nationalities, we're an indigenous nationality, and that the Fulani are invading us, killing us, taking our land. And so it could be called a countrywide consensus. So that countrywide consensus that now needs to be enforced to wind down the operation of this apartheid constitution imposed by that invading Fulani. Tinubu must now stand with his people or stand with the enemy. If he wants to stand with his people, he should by himself surrender the mandate from this election and reinvest that mandate in the task of liberating his people. The Yoruba are fed up with what Nigeria is dishing out to them. Nigeria is dragging them back into Stone Age. And if Tinubu is standing with the constitution that enslaved Yoruba in Yoruba land, let it be clear to him that that's the choice he's making in trying to be president under that constitution. And when we look back in history, we will see that this type of fight we have seen now, in which P2B and Tinubu will fight to finish, who set up the fight? The same caliphate. Did we not see it happen in the 60s, even the 50s? Awolowo, Azikiwe, who became the beneficiary? The same people that set up the fight. We saw the Akintola era. The same people that set up the fight, presiding. Here we are again. Can't we learn? And so we are saying, Ninas is saying on behalf of this alliance, that what we must do now is to get on the side of our people by ourselves. Because if we don't, the alliance is not going to, we said it before the elections, that we're not going to pay any attention. The winner of 2023 election will find out that there's no Nigeria to govern. I'm sure there's a video to that effect. If you doubt me, go on YouTube and search winner of 2023 election will find no Nigeria to govern on YouTube. So you can see the reasoning that predated the election by almost 8 months at least, if not 1 year. Where we were warning them at the time they were banding all kinds of theories around about what they were, the miracle they will come to perform when they come as president. With a constitution that enslaves us, they have become the #1 enemies of the people, because we were on the verge of taking down that monster in terms of blocking the journey to election to compel a resolution of the union dispute. They were the ones who offered the lifeline, dragging us to election that will be conducted by the Fulani. They've conducted the election. They are waiting for you in court. But we are not spectators in the matter. It is our sovereignty, it is our lives, it is our livelihood, it is our future that is at issue. And so we are inviting these two candidates today. Ninas is inviting these two front line candidates to reinvest the mandate that came from the election into the task of liberating their people from the bondage of the 1999 Constitution. Let them say that Constitution is the problem so that we can go to transition now, instead of quarreling over which of them will become president. If they do not do that, the people are going to carry on in their efforts at liberating themselves from that constitution. But let these two candidates know for sure that they will be on the side of the enemy when things get worse, because things are bound to get worse except sanity returns early enough or soon enough. Let us make hay while the sun shines. Surrender this mandate, Tinubu, P2B, for the sake of your people that have been in bondage, that are going to remain in bondage. If this constitution survives, your place in history will be that you aided the enemy to beat down your people because you wanted power at the time they were seeking freedom. It is the effort they had made to become free that you have gone to sacrifice to gain power for yourselves. Not on their behalf, because you're not going to be able to do anything for them under that constitution. Otherwise, ask Obasanjo why he didn't turn the fortunes of everybody of Yoruba land around while he was president. Or ask Jonathan why he didn't turn the fortunes of the Ijaw around while he was president. What is that Nigeria that is now paramount? Why can't we define that Nigeria? There was a Federation of Nigeria. If that is what we are trying to build now, I'll be the first on the construction site. But if it is the Unitary Nigeria that is owned by the Fulani, the Unitary Nigeria of master and servant, I tell you, we owe it an urgent duty to ourselves and the generation unborn to put that monster to death, that monster of Unitary Nigeria created by that constitution. And all of you are, jumping around to try to go to swear to defend and uphold that constitution embodying that monster. You better dress back and think. The fight you are having now amongst yourself will be a child's play when you come face to face with the owners of the sovereignty you are hijacking, standing with the enemy. We stop there.